Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. Today we'll be talking about interracial adoption pain. It's a serious issue that affects many people. Many women cannot have babies, so they decide to go the adoption route and decide probably you're Caucasian, or Black, Asian, whatever you might be, and you decide to interadopt. What are some of the pains you might come through? Pains of trolls, pains of fitting in, pains of getting acquitted with the baby, pains of being a first-time mom because you've just adopted a child, and many more pain that you go through. My guest, Kendall Mariah, will just be telling us about her own struggle. She openly documents her struggle of being a mom of the interracial adoption, about how her and her husband decided to make the decision and also decided to help the birth mother, help others who might be going through this difficult pain by sharing their story so openly to the rest of the world. She loves her baby, so she wants the rest of the world to know you love your baby, but this is not the issue. The issue is that there's so much hate out there that you need to know how to overcome that hate while loving your baby at the same time. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about my guest. Well, Kendall is a mother. She's a third-generation entrepreneur, specializing in social media content creating and brand strategy. She's been working as a digital brand and marketing strategist for nearly a decade, working with individual business clients to leading corporates, training for sales team of 1,000 plus nationwide. She loves creating authentic, engaging, and timeless brands for her clients through photography, design, and strategy. She specializes in social media content creation and strategy with experience of building over 24 websites and 24 brands. Her unique approach of prioritizing customers' behavior and conversation has helped her grow her own social media following to over 500,000 followers. We'll be talking about her brand, of course, but mostly this conversation is more focused on being a mother, a parent to an interracial baby, a Black daughter. How she dealt with it, how she dealt with the pain of the challenges that came with it, and why she's not keeping quiet, and why she's making it known that anyone who's going through that pain should understand that it can be done, that these are lessons you need to learn to help your baby and the birth mother fit in and form a loving family. Meet my amazing guest, Kendall Mariah, as she shares her story about adoption and the pain and challenges that it comes with, especially when you're adopting a different race baby. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. As I said in my introduction, today's conversation is one, if you're a mother, if you're parents, if you're thinking of having kids, you know the challenges of, so people just find it difficult to make that process work. Well, my guest today, Kendall Mariah, she'll be telling us about her own journey of going through the process of having kids and why they decided to go the adoption route. But it's not just going that route that was the issue. It's also the struggle and pain of when you've had that baby, what the world expects of you, and how she deals with that negativity from it and finds her joy to make sure she and her family has the best life ever. Meet my wonderful guest. She's a mother, third-generation entrepreneur, social media content creator, and brand strategy. She's many, many things, but most importantly, again, she's a mother. How are you, Kendall?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today.
I am so glad that you took the time out. Where are you joining me from, by the way?
I am joining you from the States. I'm actually on a military post. My husband's active duty in our armed services. He's the Army officer. And we are living on the line between Kentucky and Tennessee. So if you've ever heard of Nashville, Tennessee, the capital of music, we're about an hour north of there. So you might pick up a little bit of an accent because I am from the South here in the United States, from North Carolina originally, but we are living in Kentucky now.
I can pick up the Nashville accent of the dance, the music, and anytime we watch any program about music and the countryside music, Nashville, Tennessee always comes up. So
Yeah.
I love that I'm talking to someone who's from there who has the accent because I find it so beautiful, and
Oh, thank you.
I think I will enjoy this conversation. I'm really glad you took the time out to join me. If I were to ask you in simple words, who is Kendall?
Wow. Simply, I think I'm not simple. I, I am and have always been extra. I am a multifaceted, multi-passionate woman who is headstrong, determined, but also, gentle and hopefully perceived as being empathetic and generous. Um, I think I'm the modern woman who loves to be with my family, but I don't mind putting my hard work and energy and passion into something that I'm creating, whether it is, I say, by lens or by pen as a creator and a photographer to tell stories. And so I'm a little bit of everything and exactly who I feel like God has called me to be all at the same time.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you said whatever God has called you to be.
Mhm.
Growing up in Nashville or as a child, what was it like? Could you remember your background? What was it like just growing up as a child?
Yeah. So I grew up in Eastern North Carolina in a town of about 3,000 people. And so, if you've ever watched the show, um, based in Mayberry, Lord, it has left my head now that I say it. It's going to come back to me in a second. But the quintessential small town atmosphere where everybody knows everybody. There's a church on every corner, just a couple of stoplights. And if you were to ever get in trouble at school, your mama knew before you got home. You know, uh, that was my experience. My family owned a business on the main street. My grandfather owned a business a couple blocks away. And so to me, growing up was learning about life, was about giving to your community, using whatever resources you have, whether that is time, talent, financial, um, and spiritual gifts, and giving it back. That's what I was taught from the earliest of ages. My dad has been a deacon my whole life. My mom was ordained last week. And so we were just always one of those families that if the church doors were open, we were there. And I have wonderful memories growing up in children's church and youth group and learning that relationships with people and loving people was our religion. That as a Jesus follower, it was about love and life and pointing people to hope. And so I say all that to say, because I think my experience in the church and growing up in what people see as the South has actually been very different from other people that I've encountered, because there wasn't a strong emphasis on some of the more dogmatic practices of faith, or I wasn't raised in a place that focused a lot on sin and these people are bad. It was really a place that emphasized love and loving others through good works and pointing people towards hope. And so, that encapsulates how not only I was raised, but how I was taught to go about through my life. So I went to a college not too far away from my hometown, and a private Christian college that was also very progressive in the way that it approached faith. And, I think that's where some of the stereotypes come in about being a blonde-haired Southern-speaking woman, but it's also where people get it a little wrong, because my experience wasn't exactly what you see always portrayed on TV or read about in books.
That's very true, because there's lots of stereotypes, very the way they speak, the way they act, the way they
Right.
look, yeah. And I think the media is just tailored it that way, and everyone has that image. And I'm glad you said that's not always the case. It's not, everyone is not like
Yeah.
that. You guys are loving, you're caring, depends where you grew up, and it's, yeah. So it's nice you said that. So people now the where I am will understand that, yeah, the television might have portrayed it that way, but it's not necessarily the case. There's a different side
Right.
people don't normally see. I have to go. You got married. What year did you get married?
2015.
2015. So you got married in 2015, and your husband is in the in the army, right? And
Correct. Mhm.
and you guys know a loving couple. When did you decide that you wanted to be a mom? Because you felt like you said here, you speak passionately about the fear you felt about becoming a mother, of the certainty of losing your identity or and possibly not being enough. When did you think that, okay, now we're married, I think it's time we should have a kids? Did you guys actually try for kids as parents?
Yes, yes to all of that. Growing up, I was never one of those people that, or one of those women that couldn't wait to be a mom. I loved to play dolls as a little girl, but as a teenager and coming into my adulthood, I just never pictured myself being the minivan mom, ready to run kids to practice, or, envision myself being a stay at home mom. I had dreams and ideas of what I wanted to accomplish corporately. I also felt like what God was calling me to professionally, that I just wasn't sure that kids were a part of that. I just didn't see it. Um, but at the same time, when I was 8 years old, um, I told my mom that I wanted to have a baby, but I didn't want to have the baby in my belly. Like I somehow had separated the two. I knew that I wanted to have a baby, but I didn't want to be pregnant. Um, and because my brother and I are 4 years apart, I remember my mom being pregnant, and my mom just kind of laughed and didn't think much of it. And then in marriage counseling, before we got married in 2014, my husband and I, part of your marriage counseling typically is talking about having children. How many do you want to have? When do you want to have them? And my then fiance, and we'd been dating 6 years at the time, I kind of looked at him and said, well, I've always felt like I wanted to adopt, and I don't know that I want to be pregnant, but if adoption's not okay with you, this might not be good. And he just looked at me and said, I'm okay with adoption if that's what you feel like we'll do one day when you want to have kids. And I was like, okay, cool. And our marriage counselor was like, do we need to talk more about this? But we were both it was such a simple, people think that it was a really drawn out conversation, but it wasn't. My husband comes from a family where he's got step siblings and an adopted sibling and a half sister. And so he has all different types of siblings. And he's like, I don't love any of them any differently. I don't think having a child that's not biologically ours will change how I feel about a child, which is how I feel like a lot of people were in fear. So we didn't innately have those fears. As a child, felt drawn to it. He, had seen through his own experience that it doesn't make any different or any less of a family. So it was a very simple conversation. And then 2 weeks later, I actually had to have an emergency surgery where they removed one of my ovaries and a large ovarian mass. And so became an issue of I might not be able to have biological children. But I, as a God-fearing woman, I believe that God was just preparing our hearts, and he just knew what was coming down the pipeline. And, I didn't have to tell my fiance, that I was anticipating, really wanting to have biological children, that I might not be able to, and how he felt about that if he wasn't going to have biological kids, because thankfully we had that conversation. And so I was able to focus on my own health. So fast forward several years, we never did anything and haven't ever done anything to prevent pregnancy since we've been married. And so we would go through seasons of, well, we'll try harder this now, more of the tracking, more of the testing and all of that in this season. Because as many people, you just feel like that's what you're supposed to be doing. You get married, then the next thing people are asking about, when are you going to have children? And so for about 5 years, that's what we did. And I continued to build my business, and I had certain goals that I wanted to reach before I had children. And then one day we were out at dinner, and I had received a check as part of my grandfather's estate who had recently passed away. And it wasn't a huge lump sum that was going to change our life, but it was enough that us as a couple needed to make a decision. You know, are we going to put this towards student loans, or what are we going to do with this? And my husband just kind of looked at me and said, I think we should start the adoption process. And literally on the way home from dinner that night, we filled out the paperwork, and less than 100 days later, we were holding our baby. And so I think people anticipate it being this very emotional journey for us, but we're God-fearing people who just believed God would work it out through the whole process. And then each layer was it difficult? Yes, but it worked out just as it was supposed to for us.
Yeah, because I think that's a quick key question. People always wonder when you think adoption, it's so difficult, like to go through the adoption process from the matching to finding the right person. How difficult were those different stages for you guys?
It's difficult, you know, for several different reasons. There's the financial aspect, there's the unknown aspect. You know, with everything, there's stereotypes about the adoption process, about adoptive parents, about, you know, the child, about the expecting mother, and you're just have all these fears or worries because you've never done it before. It's like anything you've never done before. You don't know how it's going to go. You don't know how it's going to work out. And so, you know, there's a lot of emotional maturity that you have to gain through the process, and understanding, a lot of grace, plenty of patience. But I'll say that one thing I'm so grateful that we did prior to the adoption process that I think was make or break was we had worked on our marriage and had taken some time to really make sure that he and I were on the same page, that we wanted the same thing, and that we were financially on the same page, and what we were willing to do, what we were willing not to do, what were we comfortable with, what were we not comfortable with, and that our marriage was solid before we moved into the adoption process. Because I think sometimes people view adoption or having a child in any sort of way as a way to help fix the marriage or help mend the marriage because it will help bond the family. But let me tell you, if your marriage is not strong, the adoption process, infertility process will drive a deep and hard wedge, because there is just so much emotionally, physically, financially happening all at one time. It's incredibly taxing and stressful, and uncharted territory. And so, you know, it's heavy. It's a hard season because you're excited with the anticipation of becoming a parent, but you're also learning, you know, so much about expectant mothers, about the social and welfare systems. You're learning so much about the psychological and medical concerns that you need to be paying attention to, and why it's important to have open relationships with the biological family. And, you know, all the while being a mom, kind of carrying the weight of, as I'm becoming a mother, someone else is having to start a new chapter of their life without someone that they are forever connected to, you know, and so it's just heavy. And that's the word that just keeps coming up for me, is that it's heavy, and it's like anything else. There's going to be trauma and stuff to process.
And there are different types of adoption. When you decided to choose an open adoption for you. And for those who don't know, these include the adoptive parent, adoptee, and the birth mother. So you guys wanted to still be involved with the birth mother through some kind of ways. Why did you go for something more open?
Absolutely. So part of the adoption process is education. And you have to be not just educated on the child, but like what is being experienced from all parts of the tribe. The three parts you mentioned being the birth parent, the the child itself, and the adoptive family. And taking into consideration, you know, there's health and well-being for three different people here, or groups of people, not just us and the baby. And so one of the things you learn is that it is crucial that, if possible, to have as open a relationship as you have, because of the psychological effects on the adoptive child. The suicide rate amongst adopted children is way higher than children who are live with their biological family. And a lot of that comes down to children are going to ask simple questions that are sometimes simple to them, but heavy to us or difficult. Like, well, why? Why was I placed for adoption? Why did my mom not want me? Or where did I come from? Who is my other family? And as adoptive parents, we could either try to ignore that or push it to the side. Or some people, just kind of deflect it altogether, or we don't have the answers. Or if we can start from the beginning with an open adoption, we're able to have a healthy communicative relationship with all parties. And so for us, it was important that Zadie Ann be able to know both I and her biological mother, that we are a modern family. It looks a little different to everybody else, but it boiled down to my husband and I kind of said, who are we to rob a child of more love? If they are going to be loved by their biological mother or their original family, their biological family, who are we to say no to love? Like that would be completely against the whole gospel. We say what we stand for. Yeah. And so as long as it's healthy and based in love, it is just what is best for the child. And that's, as a parent, that's all you could ever want.
When you decided this is my baby, I'm so happy I've met my baby, the parents, and you guys, because you put a lovely post on Instagram when you were the birth mother, you were holding your baby. And when you guys decided that you were going to go for a Black child, what was going through your mind? What kind of questions were you asking yourself during that process when you chose a beautiful Black girl?
Well, and I think that's one of the misconceptions. We didn't choose her. We were chosen by her mother. Zadie's first mom chose us. We were open to any race. Through the adoption process, you're allowed to have certain preferences, whether it's gender, whether it's race. And we didn't have a preference on gender or race. Yes. And one of the, because you said that, well, like, we don't care, we just want a baby. But that wasn't the mentality either. We actually talked to many of our Black friends, like, do you think we're capable of raising a Black child in America today? Do you think we're equipped? Would you be willing to help us? I mean, from things down to the hair, to cultural relevancy, to I don't know what it's like to be judged by my skin when I go into the supermarket. Will you help us have those conversations with our child? And if we didn't feel equipped, both personally and within our community, our little village of family, the people that we spend our time with, then we wouldn't have been open to it. Because there are some places in the United States where maybe it doesn't seem safe. Maybe the adoptive parents don't have any Black friends or Black people in their life, or maybe they just live in an area where it's predominantly white and it wouldn't be in the best interest of that child to live there. So that might be a reason why they would prefer to not adopt outside their race. But for us, we didn't seek adopting outside of our race. The way that a matching or choosing process kind of works is we say what we're open to, and they tell us basically all the information we have is when the baby is due, when where they're located, the expectant mother is located, and like who we would be working with adoption agency wise, and the lawyer, and so that we can make sure all that information is cared for. So she was chosen, we were chosen by Zadie's mom, first mama, to be her mom. And so obviously that was incredibly heavy, as I mentioned, because as a mom, I can't imagine feeling like I needed to make that choice or making that choice. But at the same time, as a mom, I understand that there's nothing in this world I wouldn't do for my child. And so carrying that for her. So having now a daughter of a different skin color, of a darker skin complexion, there is a layer of education that I have to take on. There is a layer of understanding that I need to grasp. There's empathy that I have learned to gain, and just humbleness of, I know that I will never be able to truly empathize with her experience and being able to say, this is why we have aunties. This is why we have your birth mama. We have Mama Jada call. This is why we have people, if there are circumstances where I'm like, this is beyond my realm of experience. And so I think there's just the heaviness of that choosing that is humbling, because I'm sure if you've been in the comment sections of any of my posts, there are people that object to it every single day, you know, adopting outside of the race. And so it's like any kind of adoption, it is not, your adoption journey is not over when you're holding the baby. When you have chosen to be a part of the adoption tribe, it is the rest of your life commitment. And so obviously our skin colors, our cultural differences are a layer to that journey.
Absolutely. I think that's the challenge we find on a daily basis. Like my husband, for example, he's white Caucasian, and there's certain things that my kids might go through, he might not understand, but because I'm Black lady, I could also emphasize with him. I could share with him those challenges that they might be going through. And you know, people talk about white privilege or white there's this white privilege going on because you're white, you're both of you are whites, and you have a Black daughter who might have so many different challenges. And I say to people, the first thing you see your child as a human being, forget the race. It's when you focusing, you seeing your child as a human being that you truly love. It doesn't matter when she bleeds, we all bleed red. All our blood is the same color. It doesn't matter. The only thing is that we have darker melanin, we have more melanin than the other person. It's not much different. Even the hair, it's just, I know people say, oh, it has to be this, 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 this. It can be learned. People learn to do the white hair. I've learned to adapt into the white race as well, because my husband being white, I have to learn everything in life. Even going to school, you have to learn about school environment. If you live in another country, you have to adapt to that country. So when people come up to you and say these things, you have to also just forget those negative and focus on that. Your daughter is a human being, and as a human being, she needs the most open love, and something I love about you. When you're dealing with white privilege, I see you do it so nicely, because a lot of people talk to you about white privilege. You're using that platform for good, because you're using that platform to tell people this can be done. When did you decide that there's going to be noise out there? People are going to judge me. It doesn't matter what I do, but I'm going to turn that noise into something positive. When did you decide to do that?
It was not a decision. The following that I have now online has come mostly in the last 18 months. When we were going through the adoption process, I had a few thousand followers. I did an online Bible study, and I had a professional, creative business. And so these were people mostly from my hometown area that had followed me through college and our marriage and me moving around as a military spouse. And I was just taking them along for my journey of whatever life brought me. And so as we went through the adoption process and we brought Zadie home, and I started having these personal experiences, because prior to Zadie, everything was textbook based about what I was learning about white privilege, how I was learning about systemic issues. As we learned through the adoption process, all that was textbook, theoretical. Nothing was lived experience. But it didn't take very long, of me taking Zadie around, especially by myself, because my husband was deployed, and getting the funny looks or the offhand comments of it, and experiencing like, good gracious, I have this poor innocent child, tiny, teeny, tiny baby, and I'm experiencing a grain of this already. Then there has to be so much truth that everything that everyone is saying that they are experiencing. And so I've always approached social media as kind of an online journal, blog type, telling of my experiences. And so it wasn't this choice of like, I'm going to share about this. I've always shared about everything. I've shared about infertility. I shared about my surgeries. I shared about marriage and all those things. So it was just a natural, well, this is what's happening right now, and I'm going to talk about it. Did I take a pause and have to say, am I willing to lose it? Am I willing to lose friends? Am I to lose followers by talking about it? Yes. I have had to have that conversation with myself and those around me many times. But to me, I believe we're all given an opportunity to steward our experiences, to steward our story. And I can either ignore the haters and turn my nose up, use my white privilege and say, I don't have to deal with it. Or I can lean in and listen. And because sometimes the haters have an ounce of truth. There's a reason they're angry. There's a reason they're upset. There's a reason that they are triggered when they see someone who looks like me with a baby that looks like Zadie, and try to understand that and empathize that, because, I've had now 29 years experience as a white woman. And so it's my job to now turn and start to learn from people who've had other experiences if I want to be a best mother that I can be and wife. And the only way to do that is to lean in and start listening. And as my platform grew, I knew that my platform was now also a place of privilege, but the gift of privilege, it can be leveraged for good. And so that is kind of the revelation that I had, is that if God is going to allow me to have a platform, then it is my privilege to leverage the platform for other people who may not have it, whether that's elevating Black voices or, allowing them space to tell their story, or me just as a white person saying, hey, listen, I used to think this way too, or I would make these subconscious thoughts, or I would do silly things now that are just crazy to me, like locking my door when a Black man walks by at a grocery store, just because it was ingrained in me somehow that Black men were dangerous. Just things that you would subconsciously pick up on, and how ridiculous it was. And I'd be open and talk about it, and people are like, oh my gosh, I do that too. I didn't realize it. But unless we take time to slow down and sit like this and have conversations with people that don't look like us, that weren't raised in the same place as us, that don't believe like us, then we're never going to be able to live in a world where our children are free to be who God's called them to be in full capacity, using their full gifts, because they're constantly going to feel like there's someone saying, well, that's not how we do it. Or, you're not allowed to do that. Or they're going to see it. And that's not the world I want my daughter to be raised in. So I think it's my job to start plowing the way or blazing the trail that makes it just a little bit easier for her to walk one day.
That's amazing. I'm glad you're doing that. And you're also going as far as learning how to make her hair. I saw a video, and that video did go viral. You're doing you're plaiting her hair, which is our hair very kinky. If I don't do the whole process to my hair, it's very hard to get it down and straight. And not just you're learning to do her hair. I saw Zadie, she did the tap dancing, and that went ballistic because people saw her dancing.
Yeah.
Thinking, why is she dancing that way? You're thinking, what's wrong with her dancing? How do you react with all this backlash when people start asking questions, when she does things that you just think, okay, I'm learning to do my daughter's hair? Like anyone, any mother, any new mother would always say that. It doesn't matter, even if it's your child or not your child, the first thing you have to do as a mother, I know when I had my daughter, I had to learn how to do her hair, because people might say, oh, but you're a mother, you're Black, you should know how to do her hair. Not necessarily. I never did my hair. Someone always had to do my hair for me. So this is my first time when I'm actually sitting down to do someone else's hair and figure out how to do the. So I had to watch lots of YouTube video to figure out how to do what to do. Her hair is very different. It's a mixture between Caucasian hair and the Black hair. So it's just, I just didn't know. Even my sister, who has pure Black children, doing their hair was just things I thought, okay, that would be easy, but it wasn't easy because I haven't done hair before. How did you learn, and how did you deal with the tools of people making comments over something that is not natural for any mother to do?
Right. When we found out that Zadie's biological mother was African American and that Zadie would be African American, we decided then, before she was born, to take a course. And so my husband and I actually got a little certification in natural hair care. So that didn't go into full braiding and plaiting and twists, but it taught some basic twists, and it taught Bantu knots, and it taught washing and co-washing, and why you should have a bonnet on and why you should have silk or satin sheets. We learned all the basics before she was even born, what products to buy. And then as she was, of course, getting bigger and she ended up having to have surgery and she lost hair, it was trial and error and asking the aunties of that, or my good friends saying like, what did you use or what would you use with this type of hair? What should I be doing differently? And to me, it was just like you said, the natural motherly thing to do. We have to figure it out. And there were so many people, I think, that just assumed or thought like she's just a white woman, just take her to the salon, let somebody who knows what they're doing do their hair. And one, I was like, my baby's not even 2 yet. I don't think she's going to sit in a salon. She don't have the capacity to sit still for that long. But two, it is important to me that I learn, because it's my job as her mother is to teach her how to be confident, how to love her hair, how to not get frustrated by it. Then she can't see me frustrated by it and run to the salon just because I don't understand. And so now as she's little and we're learning how to sit still and for me to do her hair, it's important to me that I learn. And some people just, I think, were shocked by that. I think people hadn't seen it, maybe even done before that way, because they just see the other side. They just see white women with black children at the mall or at the supermarket, whether it's through adoption or biracial families, and they just make judgments on that. And they don't ask questions about, well, how did you learn? Or are you learning? Do you have questions? Can I help you? Instead, they want to make judgmental comments, or they want to immediately offer a ton of advice that was not asked for. And that can be incredibly overwhelming. And it's like with anything, not just with Eddie's hair. As a woman, if you asked anybody, what do you like about my outfit? You're going to get a million opinions. And you could have really loved your outfit, loved it. And then that one or two people would be like, it was not flattering. That is not a good color for you. And it makes you want to go take the whole thing off, even though you loved it to begin with. And so, people don't see their criticism or their help, sometimes as being critical, but it all rolls into the troll comments. And I've just learned sometimes you just have to ignore the comments altogether. But sometimes when you do, that means you miss the kind ones too.
That's true. But you've taken it upon yourself to really learn about the history, about the Black aunties. I talk about the community, and you've learned about the different things that she needs to integrate in school when she's in school, what she needs to be aware of in terms of fitting into school. What are some of the lessons you've learned that you could share with others who might be going through something similar to what you've just gone through, to help them in this process?
Absolutely. I would say one is ask someone who has been there before. So, find someone that you personally can meet, whether it's someone that has an adoptive family that is transracial, or whether it's a friend with a biracial family, like a family like yours, and ask them to coffee or to come over for dinner, or be like, can I meet you at the park? And can we just talk as friends? Because you need somebody that is going to be dead honest with you. You need somebody that's going to be able to call you out for stuff, or, people that are going to say, listen, I know you're trying really hard, but you've got to do this a little differently. And when it comes from someone that or that you can build a relationship with, it is so much easier to receive, criticism, or saying like, oh, you might want to do that a little differently. And that was one of the things with, you mentioned earlier, the circumstance with, I posted a video of Zadie with tap shoes. Once again, this was before I had near as many followers as I do now. And I grew up as a dancer. I tapped for 22 years, and I've always loved dancing. Zadie's biological family has a bunch of dancers in it. And so we decided for Christmas we were going to give her tap shoes and ballet shoes, and we put this mirror in her playroom so she could have her dance studio, because she loves to dance. I mean, you turn on any kind of music, she will dance to the washing machine going off. And so we knew she would love the tap shoes, because what toddler doesn't like to make noise, and I didn't think anything of it. All of my Black friends saw the video. It was posted for over 2 weeks before I received a single negative comment. Everybody else was like, my goodness, she's so cute. Look at her. She loves those tap shoes. Or I remember giving my baby their tap shoes for the first time. And it wasn't until one person who's a part of a really big camp that is really against people who are not descendants of slaves in the United States, that just really blew it out of context. But it was in that context and in that circumstance that I had never even considered the correlation between TAP and racism and Mr. Bojangles and the history of our country. I had never put it together because as a tapper myself, I was never told that side, which is a part of white privilege, which is a part of whitewashing in our country. I grew up tapping and thinking about tapping dating back to movies like White Christmas, never giving credit to Mr. Bojangles. And so it spurred on for me what turned into, it was a really hard, I received death threats. Like it was a really terrible time. But once I had time to step back from the emotion and say, all right, my husband and I, we started digging in and learning the history of why people might be triggered by it. And so that way, when Zadie does take tap and when Zadie loves to tap, we can say, listen, we understand, we know, but this is her choice. She enjoys it. And we're not going to keep her from doing what she loves, but we're going to make sure she has an understanding of where this came from, how, tap dancing derived from African tribal dancing and the drums and the rhythmical sounds, the importance of all that. We're going to make sure she knows that her history is in dance and not try to pluck it out as something that was originated by, white people in America post-colonization. And I think that's the difference is, do you have a posture of offense? Am I going to be upset every time someone comes for me? If I got upset and defended myself every single time, one, I would have no energy to be a good mama. But number two, I would never learn anything. And I would rather look stupid and be embarrassed and be humiliated, but on the other side, be a better mama than go through this thinking I know everything, because I don't have 29 years of experience as a Black woman. I have 28 years of being a white woman and 2 years of experience of being a mother to a child of a different race. So there is so much for me to learn. And I just think my husband and I are well aware that we're going to be on a journey of learning for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely. And you're doing a great job of it. And you shouldn't give up, because this is a process. The most important thing is just you don't forget she's a human being, so you could always love her. Mm-hmm. Just love her that way and keep giving her that love. You were a TikTok star. I don't know how did you get into that, and what gravitated you towards this platform?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I've been in social media for over a decade now. I'm a creative spirit. I love to do anything creative, whether that's videos, fun makeup, videos, dancing. And so TikTok started getting big about the time Zadie was 5 weeks old and my husband was deployed and we had quarantine. So here I was home alone with a teeny baby who just slept most of the time. And my husband was 1,000 miles away and I was bored. And so I just downloaded the app, as so many people did, and didn't have a single follower, and just started making videos of what coffee I was drinking, how I made my coffee, how I made a chocolate dessert, a silly video about doing the Macarena, just fun things. I was just fun. And then, telling our story of adoption was one, but it was all a mix. And within the first week, I had one or two of them go viral, and I was up to 10,000 followers. And my assistant was like, this is crazy. I had more followers in a week on this new platform than I had on all my other platforms combined that I'd had for a decade. And so it was at that point that I just continued to do what I do on all the platforms and be my authentic self and make videos in the way that I enjoy making them, not even necessarily how people enjoy viewing them. And I think the culture of our world and the time and spirit things were was just receptive of that, because I wasn't trying too hard. I wasn't trying to be anybody else or be impressive. I was just a mom at home bored in quarantine and was willing to talk about sometimes hard stuff.
And that's fair. You have developed the unapologetic ministry. And with this mission to live unapologetically is to understand who you are in Christ and live in it without reservation. For you, what is the practical application of your belief?
I believe that when we are living our authentic self, when we are living unapologetically, we are at our core the best image of God that we can be, because we're not putting on layers, we're not adding things. And the closer that we can be to our core, the better reflection we can be of Christ. And we are called to be reflections of Him. And it is that light, that love, that essence that is going to draw other people in and want them to say, hey, like you're different. Like, why do I feel such good energy around you? What is that? Like, what are you doing? Is it yoga? What, skincare? And be like, listen, no, that's not any of that. And as quacky as it sounds, like it comes from the freedom and the joy that I experience from having a personal relationship with Jesus. And so, it is a choice of living in freedom in Christ. It is a commitment to living a life of love and light, joy, peace, patience, all the wonderful fruits of the Spirit. But living that lifestyle is what gives us the opportunity to embrace the talents, the story, the experiences we have, and to be able to turn our privileges into platform, or our messes into messages without fear, and say, God's got it. God's going to hold it. God's going to handle it, and He's going to carry me through with it.
Finally, before I let you go, I know my baby girl might be looking for mommy very soon. What is your hope for other mothers, other parents out there looking to go into adoption? They've tried to have kids, they can't have kids, but they want to go into adoption, but they're seriously scared of the process, not just the process, of the stereotype, the trolls, the haters, the reaction of people, because you might not get the baby you want. You might get a baby of a different race, but that's the baby you truly love, and you in your heart of hearts, this is the baby I want. I could give this baby my love, but the world might not let me do it. What is your message to that person?
If you're struggling with infertility and wanting to expand your family, at first, I think you should seek counseling. I'm a huge advocate for counseling and therapy, and making sure you're healing that wound of, it's not maybe not possible to have a biological child, that you are going to have a child one day, but it's not going to be biological, because we don't want to carry that trauma into an already traumatic process through adoption. So heal yourself, heal that wound, find peace with that, because it shouldn't be your adopted child's burden to try to fill that hole. That is not that job. It is not Zeddy Ann's job to replace an emptiness in my heart. That is not her job. My heart had to be whole through my own work, through therapy, and through Christ before I ever prayed to have her in the picture. Also, if you have preferences and if you have a priority of, like, you kind of mentioned, like, if you don't want a child that's not your race, then do not put that as your preference. You are not the right parent of a child if you don't want a child of a different race. Then be honest with yourself. That's back to taking that accountability, taking that self-analyzation of, okay, if I am ready to adopt, but I'm not 100% comfortable with trolls, if I'm not 100% ready to do the personal work of racism, if I'm not ready to stand on the front line of justice, if I'm not ready to acknowledge the racism and privilege and prejudice in my own life, because we all have them, then I need to choose to adopt inside my race. Okay. If you're not willing to put that work in, then don't do it, because you're just going to add trauma to an already traumatic experience. Once again, it is not our child's job to heal any of our trauma. So we have to be willing to put all of that work in. And that's, once again, taking a good evaluation. Do you live in an area where there are people that would look like your child? If they don't, if your child would be the only Black kid in the neighborhood, the only Black kid at your church, the only Black kid in your school, then you're not the parent for that child, because that's not fair to them. the adopted child is the last person that got anything to say. And so if you are willing to be honest and have these are those hard conversations I was saying to have with someone who's been there, and you're able to go through there, then what you can do is walk into the adoption process with a little bit of confidence and saying, I'm doing what I know I'm supposed to do. I'm equipped. I'm ready to take on the challenge. I am humbled to learn and to receive what I need to change. Because there is 1,000 other things you're going to learn about the process, about trauma, about open adoption that needs you to have the energy and capacity to give and give and give. As an adoptive parent, your needs are last in the triad. They're the lowest. It is the baby first, it is the birth mother, and then it's you. And so once again, if you're not willing to sit there last and put yourself last, then it's back to counseling, you go. And that's just, and that's why we waited. We waited a long time. There was a lot of personal work. So you look at our process, it was only 100 days in the actual process, but it was years of working together, working on our marriage, working on our relationship, talking to our friends, learning about different experiences in America. What kind of parents do we want to be? Spiritual revelation that had to come. And then we walked into the process, but we walked into the process knowing that we were in good places with each other as a couple, that we were ready to put in whatever work God was calling us to, but ultimately that we believed God would give us the opportunity to step up and raise the child of a woman who would choose us. So it's just a lot of personal evaluation. It's a lot of being true with yourself. And I say this all out of love, not out of to discourage anybody more. But if you can do that work, then that's why I feel like I've gotten to live in so much love for our girl and just focus on her needs and love Zadie's first mom. And there's no jealousy. I'm not worried about her wanting to go back to her. I hope one day she gets to go spend a week or two in the summer with her and get to know her, because I'm at peace with who God has called me to be as a mom. I'm at peace with my husband, and I am just keeping my eye on who God wants me to be and realizing that he is handling everything else. I can't be God. I don't have time to be God, nor do I want to be. And so if we rely on him to do what he can do and we focus on what we can do, then he will work out everything else. And so, my encouragement to them is, get yourself right with Jesus, spend some time, getting yourself into a good spiritual place as, a single person or as a wife or as a husband in a marriage. Then come to your spouse and say, all right, I'm good with me. I need to get good with you before we add in a number 3. And then once you all are good and you're good with Jesus, then take a step forward. I think so many people skip those steps, and that's when it makes the process harder than it has to be. But when you do everything, it's amazing how God, even if the process takes a while, will show you that each step is the right way.
Wow, Kendall, thank you so much for this honest conversation. I think you would touch so many mothers who are struggling right now. And so many people look at race in a different light from this conversation, because they realize it's not always nice to be hurtful, because it's not just the mother you're affecting, you're also affecting the child as well, who's given a chance to live a better life and live in a lovely, warming home, and something you're doing out of love. The child loves you, you love the child, your husband loved the child, and I just hope that it goes well for all of you guys in the future. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had such a wonderful time.
I really appreciate I really appreciate you. Keep doing great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.